My name is Emily, I'm 26 years old, and today I'm standing in the rain outside my childhood home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. As the cold drops soak through my jacket, I watch through the window as my parents laugh with Samantha, admiring the brand new Tesla they just bought her for her birthday. The same day I received an eviction notice because I couldn't make rent. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of their reckoning. Before we start the story, please let us know where you're watching from. Please press like and subscribe to follow my journey from homelessness to justice. What would you do if your family treated you like a stranger while showering your sibling with everything you've ever dreamed of? Stay with me as I reveal how I turned my pain into power and made them all pay for their years of cruelty. Growing up as the overlooked child while Samantha received everything she wanted was my normal for as long as I could remember. I still have vivid memories of Christmas mornings when Samantha would tear through dozens of expensive gifts while I received maybe one or two modest items. At age 7, Samantha got the latest Barbie dream house complete with all accessories while I got a hand-me-down doll with missing parts from my cousin. When I tried to express my disappointment, my mother told me I should be grateful for what I have and that Samantha deserved more because she was special. This phrase would become the soundtrack to my childhood. The disparities became even more pronounced as we entered our school years. While I struggled with math homework alone at the kitchen table, Samantha had private tutors who came twice a week to help her with every subject. These weren't just any tutors. They were the best in our city, charging hundreds of dollars per session. When I asked my father if I could get some help with my algebra homework, he told me I should study harder, and that Samantha needs the extra help because she's going to be successful one day. The implication was clear: I wasn't worth the investment. The academic differences followed us into high school. Samantha's private tutors helped her get into a prestigious university that our parents paid for in full, including her dorm room and meal plan. Meanwhile, I had to work 3 part-time jobs to afford community college, living at home and commuting because I couldn't afford housing. When I finally saved enough to transfer to a state university, my parents refused to help with tuition, claiming they didn't have the money despite the obvious financial stability they demonstrated by paying for Samantha's education. The financial disparities extended to every aspect of our lives. Samantha's apartment during college was fully furnished by our parents, complete with a designer sofa and the latest electronics. She received a monthly allowance that was more than I earned from all my jobs combined. When she wanted to study abroad for a semester in Paris, our parents paid for everything without hesitation. Meanwhile, I was working at a fast food restaurant to afford my textbooks, wearing clothes from thrift stores, and counting every penny to make sure I could afford transportation to campus. The emotional neglect was perhaps the most painful part of this unequal treatment. Whenever I achieved something significant, like making the dean's list or getting a scholarship, my parents would barely acknowledge it. But when Samantha got a B in a class, they celebrated as if she'd won a Nobel Prize. I remember one particular incident when I won a regional art competition in high school. I was so proud of my painting and couldn't wait to show my parents. When I did, my mother glanced at it briefly before asking if Samantha needed help with her college applications. That same week, Samantha submitted a mediocre essay for a writing contest, and my parents threw her a party to celebrate her achievement, even though she didn't win anything. My first attempt to discuss this unequal treatment came when I was 19. I had just lost my part-time job due to budget cuts and was struggling to pay my share of the phone bill. I approached my parents during dinner and tried to explain my situation, hoping they might offer some temporary help. Instead, my father became angry, accusing me of being irresponsible and jealous of Samantha's success. My mother chimed in, telling me I should be more grateful for everything they had done for me, which, in my mind, was very little beyond the basic necessities. Samantha sat silently during this conversation, a smug smile on her face as she enjoyed her steak while I was being berated. That night, I retreated to my room and cried for hours, feeling completely alone in my own family. The emotional impact of this unequal treatment was devastating to my self-esteem and mental health. I began to believe that I was somehow less valuable than Samantha, that I didn't deserve the same love and support. I developed anxiety around my family, constantly walking on eggshells to avoid triggering their anger or disappointment. I started seeing a therapist at my university's counseling center, where I was diagnosed with depression stemming from childhood emotional neglect. Through therapy, I began to understand that my family's treatment wasn't my fault, but that knowledge didn't ease the pain of their rejection. Throughout these years, there were hints of family financial secrets that would later become crucial to my story. I once overheard my father talking on the phone about offshore accounts and tax strategies. Another time, I found documents in his home office that mentioned multiple properties and investments. When I asked about these, he quickly dismissed them as business documents and told me not to snoop. Samantha, meanwhile, seemed to know more about the family's financial situation than I did, occasionally making comments that suggested she was aware of assets my parents claimed not to have. These glimpses into their hidden wealth planted seeds of suspicion in my mind, though I wouldn't fully understand their significance until much later. As I look back on those years, I can see how the pattern of inequality was established and reinforced time and time again. Each instance of favoritism, each dismissive comment, each celebration of Samantha's mediocrity at my expense, they all contributed to the growing resentment that would eventually lead to our explosive confrontation. I had no idea then that the financial secrets I had glimpsed would become my ultimate weapon in the battle for justice, nor did I realize how far my parents would go to protect their golden child at the expense of their other daughter. The Tesla incident marked the definitive breaking point in my relationship with my family. It was Samantha's 25th birthday, and our parents had invited me to dinner at an expensive restaurant to celebrate. I had just received an eviction notice that morning, having fallen behind on rent after my hours were cut at the retail job where I worked. I was stressed and worried about where I would live, but I put on a brave face and attended the dinner, hoping to perhaps discuss my situation with my parents afterward. The dinner itself was an extravagant affair at the most exclusive restaurant in town. I arrived in my worn-out coat and thrift store dress, feeling out of place among the well-dressed patrons. Samantha was already there, dressed in a designer outfit and holding court at the table as if she were royalty. Our parents were fawning over her, hanging on her every word. I barely received a greeting when I sat down, immediately feeling like an intruder at their celebration. Throughout the dinner, I listened as our parents praised Samantha for her recent promotion at work. A job they had helped her secure through their connections. They talked about how proud they were of her accomplishments and how she deserved the best in life. Meanwhile, my own struggles went completely unnoticed. When I tried to contribute to the conversation, I was interrupted or ignored. The real shock came after dessert when our father stood up and made a toast to Samantha. "To our wonderful daughter," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "May you always have the best in life because you deserve it." Then he handed her a set of keys. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Your Tesla is waiting outside." The entire restaurant seemed to erupt in applause as Samantha squealed with delight, jumping up and hugging our parents. I sat there in stunned silence, my eviction notice burning a hole in my pocket. The contrast between their extravagant gift and my desperate situation was too much to bear. After dinner, we all went outside to admire the new car, a sleek, black Tesla Model 3 with a giant red bow on top. Samantha was practically vibrating with excitement as our parents took photos of her with the car. I stood to the side, feeling invisible and insignificant. As they were about to leave, I finally found my voice. "Can I talk to you both for a moment?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Our parents exchanged a look of annoyance but agreed to speak with me while Samantha drove off in her new car, promising to show it to all her friends. I took a deep breath and began to explain my situation, the eviction notice, my reduced hours at work, my inability to pay rent. I asked if they could possibly help me with just 1 month's rent until I could find a second job. Their reaction was not what I expected. Instead of sympathy or concern, I received anger and defensiveness. "Why is it always about you and your problems?" my father snapped. "Can't you let Samantha have one special day without making it about yourself?" My mother chimed in, "You need to learn to be more responsible, Emily. Samantha has never had these problems because she works hard and makes smart decisions." I was stunned by their response. "But I do work hard," I protested. "I've been working since I was 16. I've never asked you for anything significant." That's not true, my mother retorted. You're always asking for help. You're just jealous of Samantha's success. The conversation quickly escalated. I found myself listing all the ways they had favored Samantha over the years: the private tutors, the expensive college, the fully furnished apartment, the monthly allowance, the study abroad program, and now this Tesla. With each example, their defensiveness grew stronger. We gave Samantha those things because she earned them. My father shouted, his face turning red. She was always the better student, the more talented one. You just didn't apply yourself like she did. That's not fair. I cried, tears now streaming down my face. You never gave me the same opportunities. How could I compete with private tutors and all the advantages you gave her? At that moment, Samantha returned, having completed her joyride. She took in the situation immediately and played the victim perfectly. What's going on? She asked, her voice filled with false concern. Why are you yelling at Emily? She's ruining my birthday, our mother said dramatically. She's jealous of your Tesla and trying to make us feel guilty. Samantha looked at me with pity in her eyes. Emily, if you're having money problems, you should have just said something. I'm sure Mom and Dad would have helped. Her condescending tone was the last straw. They wouldn't help, I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. They never help me. They only help you. The confrontation reached its peak when my father issued an ultimatum. This is our family, and this is how it is, he said sternly. Samantha is our daughter who makes us proud, and you are our daughter who constantly disappoints us. You can either accept this and be grateful for what we do give you, or you can leave. The choice is yours. I looked at my mother, hoping for some sign of maternal love or protection, but found only coldness. Your father is right, she said. We can't have you constantly creating drama and making everyone miserable. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Years of suppressed hurt, resentment, and anger rose to the surface. I realized that I would never change their minds or earn their love. I would always be second best in their eyes. Fine, I said, my voice suddenly calm. I'll leave. I turned and walked away, not looking back even as they called after me. I went back to their house, packed a single suitcase with what little I had, and walked out the door with my head held high, determined to never return. As I stood on the sidewalk in the rain, watching them through the window as they admired Samantha's new car, I felt a strange mix of devastation and liberation. The family I had always longed for had never really existed, and now I was free to build a new life for myself, one where I wouldn't be defined by their neglect or Samantha's success. What they didn't know was that this wasn't the end of my story, it was the beginning of their reckoning. Standing in the rain with my suitcase, I felt completely alone and abandoned. My phone battery was dying, and I had nowhere to go. In that moment of desperation, I called Michael, a friend from college who had always been kind to me. He answered immediately and, without hesitation, came to pick me up. Michael lived in a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, but he insisted I stay with him until I figured things out. You can have the bed, he said. I'll take the couch. His kindness brought tears to my eyes. It was the first genuine offer of help I had received in years. The next few weeks were a blur of job hunting and couch surfing. Michael's apartment was tiny, and I felt guilty imposing on him, but he never made me feel unwelcome. I searched desperately for a better job, sending out dozens of resumes each day while working at a minimum wage retail position to earn some money. The stress of my situation was immense, but I tried to stay positive, focusing on building a new life for myself. The first attack from my family came unexpectedly about a month after I had left home. I started receiving strange messages from family friends and distant relatives, asking if I was okay. It turned out that Samantha had been spreading rumors about me, telling people that I had mental health issues, and was unstable and irresponsible. She painted herself as the concerned sister who had tried to help, but I had rejected their support. These rumors quickly spread through our community, affecting my job prospects and relationships with extended family members. I had an interview for a promising position at a marketing firm, and I thought it went well. But when I called to follow up, the HR representative told me they had decided to go in a different direction. A week later, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that Samantha had called the company, warning them about my instability and suggesting they shouldn't hire me. I was devastated by this betrayal. How could my own sister sabotage my career opportunities like this? The first major betrayal came when I discovered that my Aunt Victoria, who had always seemed supportive and understanding, had been feeding Samantha information about my life. I had confided in Victoria about my job search and living situation, never imagining she would share these details with Samantha. One evening, Michael and I ran into Victoria at the grocery store. She seemed nervous and uncomfortable, making small talk before asking how my therapy was going. I was confused. I had never mentioned therapy to her. When I pressed her for more information, she became flustered and admitted that Samantha had told her I was seeking help for mental health issues. That's when I realized Victoria had been communicating with Samantha behind my back. Why would you tell her things about me? I asked, hurt evident in my voice. Victoria looked ashamed. She was worried about you, Emily. She just wanted to make sure you were okay. But you knew that wasn't true, I said, my anger rising. You knew she was trying to make me look bad. Why would you help her? Victoria couldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Emily. I just thought. Well, family should stick together. The implication was clear. I was no longer considered part of the family. This realization was painful, but it also strengthened my resolve to stand on my own. The most significant discovery came by accident a few weeks later. Michael had to work late, and I was alone in his apartment, using his computer to update my resume. I noticed a folder on his desktop labeled Financial Documents and, out of curiosity, opened it. Inside were years of tax returns, bank statements, and investment portfolios belonging to my parents. Michael explained that his father was their accountant and had these documents for business purposes. As I scrolled through the files, I was shocked by what I found. My parents had been lying about their financial situation for years. They claimed they couldn't afford to help me with college tuition or rent, yet their bank accounts showed millions in savings and investments. They owned multiple properties across the country, including a vacation home in Hawaii that they had never mentioned to me. There were offshore accounts with substantial balances, and business entities set up for tax purposes. Perhaps most painfully, I found documents showing a trust fund that had been set up for Samantha when she was born, with regular contributions made over the years. The balance was now well over $1 million. There was no similar trust fund for me. As I dug deeper, I found evidence of substantial funds specifically set aside for Samantha's future, her wedding, her first home, even retirement accounts in her name. Meanwhile, I had been struggling to afford basic necessities. The anger and betrayal I felt in that moment were overwhelming. All those times they had claimed they didn't have the money to help me were lies. They had simply chosen not to. This discovery was the first glimmer of hope I had felt since leaving home. I realized I might have legal recourse against my family's financial deception. With Michael's help, I began to systematically gather evidence of their fraud, taking screenshots and making copies of relevant documents. I didn't know exactly what I would do with this information yet, but I knew it was powerful. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a shift in my perspective. For years, I had seen myself as a victim of my family's neglect and favoritism. But now, I had evidence of their deception and financial fraud. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was someone with the power to expose the truth and potentially hold them accountable for their actions. This realization gave me a new sense of purpose and determination. I wouldn't just survive on my own, I would thrive, and I would make sure they couldn't continue to deceive and manipulate others as they had deceived and manipulated me. The morning after discovering my parents' financial deception, I woke up with a newfound sense of purpose. I knew I needed allies if I was going to take on my wealthy and influential family. The first person I thought of was Jennifer, a lawyer I had met through Michael who specialized in family law and financial disputes. I called her immediately and arranged a meeting for that afternoon. Jennifer's office was in a modest building downtown, a stark contrast to the corporate law firms my parents used. She listened patiently as I explained my situation, showing her the evidence I had gathered from Michael's computer files. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her expression serious. "What your parents have done is not just morally wrong, it's potentially illegal," she said. "The financial deception, the unequal treatment of children, the false statements about their assets, there could be grounds for a lawsuit." Jennifer explained that while favoritism itself isn't illegal, there could be legal implications if my parents had committed fraud or misrepresentation, especially if they had made false statements about their financial situation to government agencies or financial institutions. She also mentioned that in some states, there are laws requiring parents to provide equal support to their children, though these laws vary and can be difficult to enforce. "The first step," Jennifer advised, "is to gather as much evidence as possible. We need to document everything: the financial disparities, the emotional abuse, the specific instances of deception." Over the next few weeks, with Jennifer's guidance, I began systematically collecting evidence. I created a timeline of events, documenting every instance of unequal treatment I could remember from childhood to the present. I wrote down specific examples, dates, and witnesses where possible. Michael helped me organize everything into a comprehensive file that would serve as the foundation of our case. Michael's support during this time was invaluable. He had been my rock since I left home, offering not just a place to stay but emotional support and practical assistance. As we spent more time together, our friendship deepened into something more. One evening, as we were organizing documents at his small kitchen table, he took my hand. "You know, I'm proud of you," he said softly. "What you're doing takes courage." I looked at him, my heart swelling with gratitude and affection. "I couldn't do this without you," I replied. In that moment, we both acknowledged the growing feelings between us, though we didn't put them into words yet. Michael's commitment to helping me went beyond emotional support. He used his tech skills to help me gather digital evidence. With his father's permission, we accessed more of my parents' financial records, looking for inconsistencies or signs of fraud. We discovered deleted emails and financial records that proved my parents had been systematically hiding assets and income for years. One particularly damning discovery was evidence of substantial funds set aside specifically for Samantha's future. There were documents showing a down payment made on a luxury condominium for Samantha's 25th birthday, the same year they bought her the Tesla. There were also records of substantial contributions to Samantha's retirement accounts, started when she was just 16 years old. Meanwhile, I had been working multiple jobs to afford basic necessities. The property records were especially revealing. We found that my parents owned several properties across the country that they had never mentioned to me or Samantha. There was a beach house in California, a mountain cabin in Colorado, and even a small apartment in New York City. These properties were held under various business entities and shell corporations, apparently for tax purposes. The most painful discovery was a trust fund that had been set up for Samantha when she was born, with regular contributions made over the years. The balance was now well over $1 million. There was no similar trust fund for me. As I gathered this evidence, I also began to focus on my emotional healing. Jennifer recommended a support group for adults from dysfunctional families, and I reluctantly agreed to attend my first meeting. I was nervous about sharing my story with strangers, but I found myself in a room with people who understood my experiences in a way no one else had. Hearing their stories and sharing my own was incredibly validating. I began to understand that my family's treatment wasn't my fault, that I wasn't less than Samantha or somehow undeserving of love and support. This therapeutic breakthrough was crucial for my self-worth. I had spent years internalizing my family's negative messages about myself, believing that I was somehow flawed or inadequate. Through therapy and the support group, I began to challenge these beliefs and recognize my own value. With Jennifer's guidance, we developed a multi-pronged approach to confront my family with legal and emotional consequences. The legal strategy involved filing a formal complaint with evidence of financial fraud, potentially involving tax authorities and other regulatory agencies. The emotional strategy involved exposing their behavior to our extended family and community, forcing them to face the social consequences of their actions. Our first small victory came when we successfully prevented my parents from accessing my bank account. I discovered that they had been making withdrawals without my knowledge or permission, apparently using information they had obtained somehow. Jennifer helped me file a complaint with the bank, change my account numbers, and put safeguards in place to prevent future unauthorized access. This victory, though small, gave me a sense of empowerment. I was no longer a passive victim of their manipulation. I was taking active steps to protect myself and hold them accountable. As I gathered more evidence and built my case, I felt a growing sense of control over my life. The power dynamic was shifting, and for the first time, I felt like I had the upper hand. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but I was ready for the fight. Just as I was beginning to feel empowered by the evidence I had gathered and the allies I had found, Samantha launched a devastating counterattack. It started subtly, with whispers among our extended family and friends, but quickly escalated into a full-blown social media campaign against me. Samantha and her friend Jessica created anonymous social media accounts that posted false stories about me, painting me as unstable, irresponsible, and mentally ill. They fabricated incidents from my past, twisting real events and creating entirely fictional ones to make me look bad. One particularly damaging post claimed I had been fired from multiple jobs for erratic behavior and emotional instability. Another suggested I had a history of substance abuse, which was completely untrue. These posts were shared widely among our community, and soon people who had once been friendly to me were looking at me with suspicion and pity. The false accusations didn't stop at personal attacks, they extended to my professional life as well. Samantha contacted my employers at the retail store where I was working, telling them I was unreliable and might have mental health issues that could affect my job performance. Although my manager knew me well and didn't immediately believe these claims, the seed of doubt had been planted. A week later, I was called into a meeting with HR and told my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. I knew this was a direct result of Samantha's interference, but I had no way to prove it. The professional sabotage was devastating. I had been counting on this job to pay my bills and save money for a place of my own. Now I was unemployed again, with the added burden of trying to clear my name. The social media campaign continued to escalate, with new posts appearing almost daily. Each one was more damaging than the last, creating a narrative of me as a disturbed and dangerous person. The housing crisis came next. Michael's landlord, who had initially been fine with me staying temporarily, began receiving anonymous calls about me. The caller claimed I was unstable and might be a danger to other tenants. Although the landlord liked Michael and was initially skeptical, the persistence of the calls and the detailed, though false, stories began to wear down his trust. One evening, he called Michael to express his concerns about having me in the building. "I'm sorry, man," he said. "I like you, but I can't have this kind of drama. She needs to find somewhere else to stay." This news hit me hard. Michael's apartment had been my safe haven, the one place where I felt secure after leaving my family home. Now that was being threatened too. I felt like I was being pushed out of every corner of my life, with nowhere left to turn. That night, I hit rock bottom. The combination of losing my job, potentially losing my housing, and the relentless social media campaign was overwhelming. I felt completely alone, abandoned, and hopeless. For the first time since leaving home, I contemplated suicide. The pain of my family's betrayal, coupled with the systematic destruction of my reputation and livelihood, felt like too much to bear. I sat on the fire escape of Michael's apartment building, looking down at the street below, wondering if it would all be over if I just let go. As I sat there in the darkness, my phone buzzed. It was Michael, calling to check on me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Emily? Are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I couldn't speak, the tears choking me. "Emily? Talk to me. Where are you?" I managed to tell him where I was, and he rushed home, finding me still on the fire escape. He didn't say anything at first, just wrapped his arms around me and held me tight. "I'm here," he said softly. "You're not alone. We'll get through this together." His intervention came just in time. Michael stayed up with me all night, talking, listening, and reassuring me. He reminded me of the strength I had shown so far, the evidence we had gathered, and the allies we had on our side. By morning, the suicidal thoughts had passed, replaced by a renewed determination to fight back. The legal setback came a few days later. Jennifer called to tell me that my family had taken steps to protect their assets from legal claims. They had hired an expensive law firm that specialized in asset protection and had apparently moved or hidden some of the funds we had discovered. They're preparing for a potential lawsuit, Jennifer explained. This makes things more difficult, but not impossible. We'll need to adjust our strategy. The hidden betrayal revelation came shortly after. Through a mutual acquaintance, I learned that Aunt Victoria had been actively helping my family hide assets and coordinate their defense against potential legal action. She had apparently been acting as an intermediary between my parents and their lawyers, facilitating the transfer of funds to offshore accounts and shell corporations. This news was devastating. Aunt Victoria had always been the one family member I thought I could trust, the one who seemed to understand my pain. Learning that she had been working against me all along felt like the ultimate betrayal. It also meant that my family's network of allies was larger and more organized than I had realized. In the face of these setbacks, I felt a moment of despair. My family had more resources, more powerful allies, and fewer scruples about how they fought their battles. They seemed to be winning, while I was losing my job, my housing, and my reputation. But as I sat with Michael, going over our options, I felt a new determination rising within me. They had pushed me to the brink, but I had survived. They had tried to destroy me, but I was still standing. If they want to fight, I said to Michael, my voice cold with resolve, then I'll give them one. But it'll be on my terms now. I realized that I needed to be more strategic, more ruthless in my approach. I had been playing by the rules, trying to use legal channels and ethical means to confront my family. But they weren't playing by the same rules. They were using every dirty trick in the book to destroy me, and it was time for me to fight back with the same intensity. This new determination marked a turning point in my approach. I was no longer just trying to hold them accountable. I was determined to win. After hitting rock bottom, I emerged with a renewed sense of purpose and a more strategic approach to fighting back against my family. With Jennifer's guidance, we developed a multi-pronged counterattack that would expose my family's deception and manipulation to a wider audience. The first element of our strategy was media engagement. Jennifer advised me on how to tell my story to local media, framing it not just as a family dispute but as a broader issue of financial fraud and emotional abuse. We reached out to a local investigative journalist who had a reputation for exposing corruption and injustice. I was nervous about sharing my story with the media, but I knew it was necessary if I wanted to create pressure on my family. The journalist, a seasoned reporter named Sarah, met with me and Michael at a quiet coffee shop. I brought all the evidence I had gathered, and as I told my story, I could see the determination in her eyes. "This is bigger than just your family," she said. "This is about systemic inequality and financial deception." Sarah's article was published a week later in the local newspaper, with an accompanying online version that quickly went viral. The piece was carefully researched and balanced, but it didn't shy away from the evidence of financial fraud and unequal treatment. The article included quotes from Jennifer about the potential legal implications of my parents' actions, as well as input from a psychologist about the long-term effects of parental favoritism and emotional abuse. To protect my identity while the legal proceedings were ongoing, Sarah used a pseudonym for me, but the details of my story were clear enough that those who knew our family would recognize who we were talking about. The article's impact was immediate and significant. It generated hundreds of comments and shares, with many readers expressing support for me and outrage at my family's behavior. Some even shared their own stories of parental favoritism and financial deception, creating a sense of community and solidarity around the issue. Building on this momentum, I started an anonymous blog where I could share more details of my story and connect with others who had similar experiences. The blog, titled The Invisible Child, became a platform for discussing family favoritism, emotional abuse, and financial inequality. I wrote about my experiences growing up as the overlooked child, sharing specific examples of the unequal treatment I had endured. I also invited others to share their stories, creating a space for people who had felt invisible in their own families. One particular post I wrote about the Tesla incident went viral, attracting media attention beyond our local area. The post described in detail the contrast between Samantha's extravagant gift and my desperate financial situation at the time. It resonated with many readers who had experienced similar disparities in their own families. The post was shared thousands of times and even picked up by national media outlets. My family's reaction to the growing public attention was swift and defensive. They issued a statement through their lawyer, claiming that the media reports were filled with falsehoods and exaggerations, and that I was a troubled young woman seeking attention and financial gain. They portrayed themselves as the victims of a vindictive campaign by a disgruntled daughter. Samantha also took to social media, posting tearful videos about how difficult and unstable I had always been, and how she had tried so hard to help me over the years. She played the victim perfectly, claiming my actions were causing her emotional distress and affecting her mental health. While we were building our media strategy, Jennifer was also preparing legal action. We filed a formal complaint with the district attorney's office, presenting evidence of financial fraud and deception. The complaint detailed how my parents had hidden assets, made false statements about their financial situation, and systematically favored one child over the other in ways that could constitute financial abuse. Jennifer also suggested involving adult protective services regarding the emotional abuse and financial exploitation, though this was a more complex legal avenue to pursue. The community support that emerged from the blog and media coverage was overwhelming. People from all over the country reached out with messages of support, sharing their own stories and offering advice. Many offered practical help as well: job leads, housing options, legal advice. I was amazed by how many people had experienced similar situations in their own families. This sense of community was incredibly validating and empowering. The second major betrayal came when we discovered that Jessica, Samantha's best friend, had been actively coordinating the attacks on me. Through a mutual acquaintance, we learned that Jessica had created the anonymous social media accounts that spread false rumors about me. She had also been the one contacting my employers and Michael's landlord. We gathered evidence of Jessica's involvement, including screenshots of conversations where she discussed the campaign against me with Samantha and other friends. Armed with this evidence, we considered legal action against Jessica for defamation and harassment. Jennifer advised that while a lawsuit was possible, it would be expensive and time-consuming. Instead, we decided to expose Jessica's role in the harassment campaign through the blog and media contacts. The turning point came when the media attention began to affect my parents' professional reputations. My father was a prominent businessman in our community, and my mother was involved in several charitable organizations. As the story gained traction, they began to face professional consequences. Business associates distanced themselves, and some of my mother's charitable work was put on hold pending investigation. The pressure was mounting, and my family was starting to feel the heat. As we prepared for the next phase of our strategy, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. We had made significant progress in exposing my family's behavior and building support for my case. But I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight, and I braced myself for their next move. As the media attention grew and our legal strategy took shape, my family's retaliation became increasingly aggressive and desperate. They hired an expensive law firm known for its aggressive tactics and began a campaign to discredit me publicly. Their lawyer issued statements to the press, painting me as a troubled individual with a history of instability, who was seeking to extort money from her loving parents. They even obtained a restraining order against me, claiming I had made threats against them, something I had never done. The legal threats were intimidating. Their lawyers sent threatening letters to Jennifer, warning her of professional consequences if she continued to represent me. They also threatened to sue me for defamation if I continued to make false statements about them. These tactics were designed to scare me into dropping the case, and for a moment, they almost worked. I felt a wave of fear and uncertainty. My family had unlimited resources to fight me in court, while I was struggling to pay my bills. The legal battle could drag on for years, draining my finances and emotional energy. I considered dropping the case, cutting my losses, and trying to rebuild my life in peace. This was my second near-defeat moment. The weight of my family's power and resources felt overwhelming, and I wondered if I had made a mistake by taking them on. But Michael and Jennifer rallied around me, reminding me of how far I had come and the evidence we had gathered. "They're trying to intimidate you because they're scared," Jennifer said. "They know we have a strong case, and they're doing everything they can to make you back down." Michael's support was crucial during this difficult time. He had been my rock throughout this ordeal, offering not just emotional support but practical assistance as well. He helped me research legal options, connected me with resources, and even contributed financially to my legal defense. His belief in me never wavered, even when my own did. The unexpected ally came in the form of a former employee of my father's company. A man named Robert reached out to me through the blog, claiming to have information about my father's financial misconduct. We met at a neutral location, and Robert handed me a folder filled with documents. "Your father fired me 6 months ago," he explained. He claimed it was for performance issues, but I think it was because I knew too much about his financial practices. Robert's evidence was explosive. It included documentation of systematic tax evasion, offshore accounts, and fraudulent business practices. There were emails between my father and his accountants discussing how to hide income and assets from the IRS. There were also records of shell corporations and complex financial transactions designed to obscure the true extent of his wealth. This whistleblower evidence was a game changer. It provided concrete proof of financial misconduct that went beyond the family dispute and had serious legal implications. With Robert's testimony and the documents he provided, we had enough evidence to potentially bring criminal charges against my father. The tax implications were particularly serious. The evidence suggested that my father had been evading taxes for years, potentially owing millions in back taxes and penalties. This was not just a civil matter anymore. It was a criminal issue that could result in prison time. Armed with this new evidence, we made a strategic decision. Instead of continuing to pursue the family dispute through civil channels, we decided to file a formal complaint with the IRS about my father's tax fraud. This was a significant escalation, moving the battle from the family and civil courts to federal criminal investigation. As we prepared to file the IRS complaint, Samantha's attacks became more desperate. She seemed to sense that the walls were closing in, and her behavior grew increasingly erratic. She posted frantic videos on social media, claiming I was destroying our family and ruining innocent lives. She even staged a mental breakdown at a family gathering, claiming the stress of my actions was causing her severe emotional distress. The physical confrontation happened at a local coffee shop where I was meeting with Jennifer. Samantha showed up unexpectedly, accompanied by Jessica and another friend. She demanded to speak with me, her voice trembling with rage. "You're trying to destroy our family," she accused, her eyes wild with anger. "You've always been jealous of me, and now you're trying to take everything we have." I tried to remain calm, but Samantha's aggression escalated. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You think you're so smart with your evidence and your lawyers," she hissed. "But you don't know who you're dealing with." The confrontation nearly turned physical before Jennifer intervened and the coffee shop manager asked Samantha to leave. As she was escorted out, Samantha turned to me with a look of pure hatred. "You'll regret this," she promised. "I'll make sure you pay for what you've done." This incident was a turning point for me. Seeing Samantha's true colors, her unmasked aggression and entitlement, strengthened my resolve. I was no longer fighting just for myself, I was fighting against a system of privilege and entitlement that allowed people like my family to use their power and wealth to harm others without consequence. The strategic move to file a complaint with the IRS was the culmination of our counterattack. Jennifer helped me prepare a comprehensive report, including all the evidence we had gathered. Robert's whistleblower documents, the financial records from Michael's father, the evidence of hidden assets and unequal treatment. We submitted the complaint to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, knowing it would trigger a formal investigation into my father's finances. As we waited for the IRS to respond, I felt a mix of fear and anticipation. I had set in motion events that could potentially destroy my family, but I also felt a sense of justice. Of finally holding them accountable for their actions. The next phase of the battle would be fought on a much larger stage, with federal investigators and criminal charges. I had come a long way from the girl standing in the rain with a suitcase, and I was ready for whatever came next. The IRS investigation marked the beginning of the end for my family's carefully constructed facade. 2 weeks after we filed the complaint, federal agents arrived at my parents' home with a search warrant. The news broke quickly, with local media camped outside their house as agents carried out boxes of documents and computers. The sight of my parents, usually so composed and in control, being subjected to a federal investigation was surreal. The media explosion that followed was intense. What had started as a local story quickly became national news. Major networks picked up the story, focusing on the dramatic contrast between my family's public image as philanthropists and community leaders and the reality of their financial fraud and family dysfunction. I watched from Michael's apartment as reporters detailed the allegations against my father: tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud. The community reaction was swift and unforgiving. Business associates who had once courted my father's favor now distanced themselves, issuing statements condemning his actions. The charitable organizations my mother had been involved with launched internal investigations, and several removed her from their boards. The family that had once been at the center of our community's social scene suddenly found themselves ostracized and vilified. Samantha's breakdown was dramatic and public. A week after the raid, she was arrested for driving under the influence, crashing her Tesla into a tree. The mugshot, showing her disheveled and tear-streaked face, was plastered across tabloids and gossip sites. In the days that followed, she gave a series of interviews to entertainment news shows, claiming she was the real victim in all of this. "My life has been destroyed by my sister's jealousy," she told one reporter, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't stand that I was successful and happy, so she decided to take everything from us. But her narrative didn't resonate with the public. By now, the evidence of my family's financial fraud was overwhelming, and Samantha's attempts to paint herself as the victim fell flat. Instead, she came across as entitled and out of touch, complaining about losing her luxury car and designer clothes while people were losing their homes due to my father's financial misconduct. My parents' panic was evident in their increasingly desperate attempts to control the narrative. They gave interviews claiming they were being targeted and persecuted, arguing that the investigation was politically motivated. They even tried to portray themselves as victims of a vindictive daughter, who was seeking revenge for perceived childhood slights. But these attempts to deflect responsibility were unconvincing. The evidence against them was too strong, and their claims of persecution rang hollow in the face of documented financial fraud. The symbolic moment came when the Tesla was repossessed. With their assets frozen and bank accounts seized, my parents could no longer maintain the lavish lifestyle they had enjoyed. The repossession of Samantha's birthday gift, captured by news cameras, became a powerful symbol of their fall from grace. The family intervention happened at my aunt and uncle's home, where extended family members had gathered to discuss the situation. I was invited to attend, and I arrived nervous but prepared for what might come. To my surprise, several family members apologized to me for not recognizing the signs of unequal treatment and financial deception. "We should have seen it," my cousin said, taking my hand. "We should have spoken up when we saw how differently you and Samantha were treated." The most powerful moment came when my uncle, my father's brother, stood up and addressed the room. "What you did to Emily was wrong," he said, looking directly at my parents. "But more than that, what you did to this family, to our community, to the people whose lives you've affected with your financial misconduct, that's unforgivable." Aunt Victoria's exposure happened during this meeting. My cousin revealed that Victoria had been actively helping my parents hide assets and coordinate their legal defense. When confronted, Victoria broke down, admitting that she had been trying to protect the family, but acknowledging that she had gone about it the wrong way. "I'm sorry, Emily," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was wrong." The legal consequences were swift and severe. My father was indicted on multiple counts of tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud. If convicted, he faced decades in prison and millions in fines. My mother was also charged, though to a lesser extent, for her role in the financial deception. Samantha, while not directly involved in the financial crimes, faced legal troubles of her own, including the DUI charge and potential charges related to her role in the harassment campaign against me. As the legal proceedings moved forward, I had a decision to make. The prosecutors offered me a deal. Testify against my parents in exchange for immunity and potentially a share of any recovered assets. It was a tempting offer, one that would not only hold my family accountable but also provide me with some financial compensation for years of unequal treatment. But it also meant participating in their destruction, ensuring that my father would likely spend the rest of his life in prison. I spent days wrestling with this decision, weighing my desire for justice against the reality of what it would mean for my family. In the end, I agreed to testify, not out of revenge but because I believed it was the right thing to do. My family had committed serious crimes that had harmed not just me but countless others. They needed to be held accountable, not just for my sake but for the sake of justice. As I prepared for my testimony, I felt a sense of closure. The girl who had stood in the rain with a suitcase was gone, replaced by a woman who had found her voice and her power. I had faced my demons, exposed the truth, and reclaimed my life. Whatever the outcome of the legal proceedings, I had already won. 6 months after the IRS raid, my family's circumstances had changed dramatically. My father was convicted on multiple counts of tax evasion and fraud, sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. My mother received a lesser sentence of 3 years for her role in the financial deception. Their assets were seized, properties sold, and bank accounts frozen. The once wealthy family who had seemed untouchable was now facing financial ruin. Samantha, after completing court-ordered rehab for her DUI, struggled to adapt to life without the privileges she had always taken for granted. The Tesla was gone, replaced by a used sedan she could barely afford. Her designer clothes were replaced with thrift store finds, and her lavish social life diminished as former friends distanced themselves from the family scandal. She tried to maintain her sense of entitlement, complaining frequently about her reduced circumstances, but without her parents' wealth and influence, she found herself treated like everyone else. My parents' apology came during a prison visit, a reluctant and incomplete acknowledgement of their wrongdoing. "We made mistakes," my father said, avoiding eye contact. "We perhaps favored Samantha more than we should have." My mother added, "We always loved you, Emily. We just showed it differently." The apology felt hollow, lacking genuine remorse or understanding of the pain they had caused. They seemed more focused on their own suffering than on acknowledging the harm they had done to me and others. I left the prison visit feeling no sense of relief or closure, only a quiet sadness for what might have been. My healing journey was gradual but steady. With the financial settlement from the legal case, I was able to secure stable housing and return to school to complete my degree. I continued therapy, working through the complex emotions that surfaced as I watched my family face the consequences of their actions. The support group remained a crucial part of my healing process, providing a space to share my experiences and learn from others who had faced similar situations. I built new relationships based on mutual respect and genuine connection. Michael and I grew closer, our friendship deepening into a romantic relationship built on trust and understanding. He had been my rock throughout this ordeal, and I couldn't imagine my life without him. We moved into a small apartment together, creating a home filled with warmth, laughter, and mutual support. My career flourished as I completed my degree in marketing and landed a job at a company that valued my skills and contributions. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and appreciated for who I was, not for how I compared to someone else. The financial stability allowed me to explore creative pursuits I had long abandoned, including art, which had once been a source of joy but had been tainted by my family's dismissal of my talents. Rebuilding my self-worth after years of emotional neglect was an ongoing process. There were days when the old insecurities surfaced, when I wondered if I was truly worthy of love and success. But these moments became less frequent as I internalized the truth. My value had never been determined by my family's treatment of me. I established healthy boundaries with my family, limiting contact to what felt safe and necessary. I communicated with Samantha occasionally, but our conversations remained superficial, never addressing the deeper issues between us. With my parents in prison, contact was limited to occasional letters and monitored visits, which I chose to keep brief and focused on practical matters. Forgiveness was a complex journey. I came to understand that forgiveness wasn't about excusing their behavior or forgetting the pain they had caused. It was about releasing myself from the burden of anger and resentment that had weighed me down for so long. Forgiveness, for me, meant accepting what had happened, acknowledging the pain, and choosing to move forward without allowing their actions to define my future. The deep lesson I learned through this experience was that true family isn't about blood but about mutual respect, love, and support. The family I had built with Michael and close friends provided the emotional nourishment I had always craved but never received from my biological family. I learned that sometimes the healthiest choice is to let go of toxic relationships, even with family members, and create your own chosen family. As I reflect on my journey, I'm struck by how far I've come from that rainy night when I stood outside my childhood home with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. The path hasn't been easy, but it has been worth it. I've reclaimed my voice, my worth, and my future. I've turned my pain into power and my wounds into wisdom. Now, as I look toward an uncertain but hopeful future, I'm filled with a sense of peace and possibility. The story of my family's fall from grace has become a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked privilege and the importance of moral integrity. But for me, it's simply the story of how I found myself after being lost for so long. Have you ever experienced favoritism or unequal treatment in your family? How did you handle it? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members for your own well-being? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If you found this story meaningful, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who might benefit from hearing it. Your support helps us continue to share these important stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and transformation. May you find the courage to speak your truth, the strength to set healthy boundaries, and the wisdom to build a family, biological or chosen, that loves and respects you for who you are. Remember, your worth is not determined by others' treatment of you, but by the love and respect you show yourself. Stay strong, stay true to yourself, and never give up on the possibility of a better tomorrow.